And I'll turn it over to David. David, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name's David Miller. I'm a member of the Jamaica Pond Poets, and I will welcome you to this chapter and verse reading this evening. This is a really terrific turnout, very, very heartening. We're going to have a fine evening, I know. The Jamaica Pond Poets sponsors chapter and verse monthly between basically September and the spring. We're now in our 27th year, I think, of sponsoring this program. Tonight we have 3 poets, although chapter and verse also does include poetry and prose. You know, in many cases. Tonight we have 3 poets. Just a couple things before we get started. Just many of you know this, but perhaps some people don't. Prior to the pandemic, chapter and verse readings were held in the historic, Loring Greenough House in Jamaica Plain, 18th century home in Jamaica Plain. And we haven't been there. We look forward to returning when it's possible, although, of course, like many people, we appreciate the reach that an online venue provides. We also like to be cozy and in person and face to face, but we're not there now, certainly. The Jamaica Pond Poets buys a book from each of the readers on our chapter and verse programs and donates that to the Jamaica Plain branch of the Boston Public Library, which fortunately has now reopened. So there is a collection of chapter and verse of regional, well, people who have read in chapter and verse. It's largely regional, not entirely, of course, regional, which you can browse and you can find there. Information on how to buy the books from our readers has already been posted in the chat, will be posted again, and certainly was sent to you in the emails that you received initially, at least most everyone received, announcing this program. So we'll come back to that later on. Also, information on how to get on the chapter and verse email list will be put in the chat too, in case you are not already on our list. So those, I think, are the preliminaries. Our readers this evening are in this order: Jennifer Markell, Jan Schreiber, and Danielle Legros. I'll introduce each one first before their reading. So we'll begin with Jennifer. Jennifer Markell's first poetry collection, Samsara, from Turning Point in 2014, was named a must-read book by the Massachusetts Book Awards. Her second collection, Singing at High Altitude, was published by the Main Street Rag just last month. Her work has appeared in the Bitter Oleander, the Cimarron Review, Consequence, and Rhino, among other publications. She works as a psychotherapist, serves on the board of the New England Poetry Club, tends 2 gardens and 3 well-versed cats. And the links, there are 2 links for Jennifer. One if you would like a signed copy, but also another link directly from the Main Street Rag site. So you can follow up on that later. But I'll turn this on now over to Jennifer.
Jen, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay. So thank you, David and Dorothy and Sandy and all the Jamaica Pond poets who I have been sharing poems with for 15 years now. You've made me a better writer and helped sustain me. I'm really excited and also humbled to be here with Poets Laureate and translators Danielle Legros and Jan Schreiber. And thanks also to everyone who turned out tonight for the gift of your presence. There are some friends from across the country I haven't seen in many years. And as we've been saying, it's the upside of Zoom. So I'm going to be reading from my new book. I think there's one post-book poem. This is the pretty cover by a local photographer who paints over his photos. Singing at High Altitude, published last month by the Main Street Rag. And this is my first reading from the book. So it's very fitting The first reading I ever did was with chapter and verse about 15 years ago. I didn't have a book then, and I wasn't sure I ever would. So this is great. All right. So I've been thinking and talking a lot with people lately about what it means in these times to have hope, what hope is and isn't, and how it isn't the same thing as optimism, for instance, and how it can be helpful to think of hope as a verb, an action, a way of being, and certainly more than a noun. So this is called American Robin. I saw the fledgling lying on the step by the Weekly Gazette, rushed inside for a scarf or handkerchief, some soft thing to carry the bird to safety, as if one dark eye, open still, held the world's hope. As I kneeled at the bird's brown feet, his eye met mine, then closed. I grieved what I could, read breast and wing, and then I got back to work. We're living in really unnerving times, as you're all aware, and volumes have been written and will continue to be written. And I have a very brief grappling here of my own that I will share for you, with you. It's a little prose poem. How we lived in 200 words or less. We lived in an age tinged with yellow, the sun caught off guard. In cities too expensive to live in, the young built tiny houses, squeezed into garages and vacant lots. They cooked on camp stoves, preparing for life in the wilderness, which had largely been destroyed. Occasionally, a moose appeared in the parking area of the job lot. News teams scrambled to interview the moose. How does it feel to have your habitat decimated while luxury homes proliferate? What do you make of billionaires stocking bunkers with gold bricks and dried mushroom powder? While the young braced themselves for the future, the nation's leaders lived only for today. Lessons of the past were immaterial. Tomorrow would be subdued swiftly and severely by the United States Space Force. News unfolded in a 26-hour cycle because 24 hours were no longer sufficient for tracking the lies recorded on virtual ledgers for posterity. The next poem was inspired by trying on hats in a hat store in Provincetown one rainy afternoon, which is a fun thing to do. And strange things join up in poems sometimes, like faith and hats. Hard to get a bead on God. Sometimes try belief like a hat, tilting to see how things appear under a brim, run the finger along a hollow edge and stride through sullied alleys haloed by faith. Sometimes rest on a hard bench with the atheists, Darwin and Marx, Simone de Beauvoir. Consider evolution, transcendent hand, siren song of paradise. Goethe drops by, if God exists, time to review the plan. Raptors fly in and out of dreams. For every answer, 1,000 questions expand as time on earth recedes. Sing in the shower. Janice and Aretha join in the space between words. Aretha looks divine in her feathered hat. As a therapist and writer, I'm always trying to look closely and see things through other lenses and from different angles, different hats, so to speak. So when I saw some photographs taken through microscopes that zoomed way in on familiar natural subjects, objects, I was compelled to write about what I saw. There are a few botany science words in here, so I'm going to just define them in case they're distracting. Diatom is a single-celled algae. Stoma are tiny openings in the epidermis of a plant organ, the skin. and Trillium is a perennial woodland plant. So up close. A dandelion's fruiting head, a jeweled amphora. Spinach tissues blue mosaic, too beautiful to eat. Stoma on Trillium skin, what's laid bare by a microscope. A pine needle's thirst, seen at the infection site. Brown fungus burrowing through a season's drought. For now, the lobed algae live on, traveling in pairs, and pollen grains gather on anthers. Tucked inside feathers of whistling ducks, diatoms gorge on sunlight. So I worked for over a decade at a community mental health center, starting out on the intensive family intervention team, which worked to help parents at risk of losing custody of their kids. And doing this work, I came to see families through a different lens, again, a more systemic lens, including the abuse that can occur within families who are in distress. This poem is called Mrs. Fonseca. My son must learn to obey. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir, officer, eyes turned down. She sizes him down so small he'll slip through sidewalk cracks unseen. Lights off, he learns the orbit of her eyes, her leather belt. We discuss the incident, logical consequences, what I've been trained to say, what I mostly mean. She stares at my teeth, lineup of innocence. You think you can change the world? She signs the treatment plan, accepts a new mattress, toy kite we both know will come undone in the wind. I imagine him flying off, landing somewhere far from here, where a rocky shore calls dibs on a halcyon harbor. And this is a new poem. That's the only poem I'll read tonight that's not in the book. Some things I stole as a child. Garnet, cinnamon sticks, map of lion habitat. My grandmother's evening in Paris and a stranger's name spelled backwards. I was a thief of 3 blind mice and a dozen curse words stashed in a jam jar with pennies from heaven, a song my father crooned when it rained. Displaced, the lion roared, its mane unkempt, my mother said, of the latchkey girl in the apartment next door. For her, I stole a butterfly barrette. Inside the lion, something trembled, afraid of itself, like a clock or a bomb. I set the table with goblets and raw meat. Where was home and what on earth and who were these people who called themselves a family? So we have a lot of wild turkeys around town now. I'm sure a lot of you have seen them in strange places as their habitat shrinks and predators are disappearing. They're kind of taking over in record numbers around New England. And officials are telling residents to assert dominance over turkeys if they seem aggressive. And I thought this was rather, I don't know, amusing, maybe unnecessary. And then one day I met up with the Tom in my own backyard. So this is called The Tom. The other birds scattered, but not you. Facing me, you raised your copper tail feathers in a glorious shield. You held your ground and I held mine. It was just the two of us, deadlocked on impassive flagstone. I was frightened at first by your ungainliness. No, your ugliness. How else to describe your blood red wattle and atrophied ice blue head? You appeared on the patio leading a flock. I tried to behold you as noble beast, beauty in your raiment. Thank you for your service. But your dangling snood unnerved me as I stood at the kitchen window watching you claw the dirt so close to the house. With a sudden flap, you hoisted your heft onto the patio table while your troop pressed themselves against the sliding door. You hopped down, leaving a curl of steaming shit. Something feral came alive in me. I ran out the door, pushed past your gang, grabbed the super soaker gun, and chased you through the garden, pumping my arms like a Marine, shouting, "Oorah!" So that's my, my true story of the turkey. Okay, so I've been watching the new documentary Get Back about the making of the album Let It Be by the Beatles, and I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. So I thought I'd read my Beatles poem tonight. Hey Jude. Here's to the Beatles who sang it in '68, my father and me keeping time on the causeway, protesters circling with peace signs below. We sang it at Hojo's, where a young waitress wept. At the pet store again, watching angelfish fight. We carried them home in bags swelled with water. Here's to water and all it carries, houseboats, barges, breadcrumbs thrown for our sins, handful of ashes, the body's remains, metrical moon composing the sea, sad songs let out on the tide. The patron saint of headaches. Grocers, grooms, the falsely accused, a saint for every cause. Saint Agnes of sex addicts, Adrian of arms dealers, Anthony of Padua tracking lost luggage, the odd lot of human need flourishing. Waiters, beekeepers, anglers trolling depleted seas, Saint Zita of the misplaced keys, doubters and bakers of holy wafers, all of us impossible causes. Blinded by migraine, Teresa of Avila summited the mountain, head in hand. Her trials, our transient pain. And the next poem is a love poem for Jay, inspired by the Alhambra Palace in Spain. Alhambra Lime. Here it is, stealing home to you across the Atlantic, defying time zones, joyride on the conveyor belt past customs agents undetected. You'd noticed a lime in an eddy of wilted leaves, heady with arabesques. You stroked its simple skin as if inside lay a jewel from the palace on the hill of the sun. It was late September. The Puerta de las Granadas courtyard glittered with fallen limes. We held each other in the infinity pool, skin to skin in aqua glint. Post magic. When the old fishermen have discovered all the oracle bones, when the last wax harmonica melts and the Lucky Star dream book is forever out of print, when little birds fall from a secret place in the sleeve and Zoltar the Magnificent cries out as a seaside arcade collapses, could a girl escape on a reversing tide, ride all the way, larkspur and hollyhocks dispatched to weary romantics? Would wonder cabinets unlock their doors? Love letters signed in invisible ink. Just a couple more here. The time I wrote this poem, it was dedicated to Dr. Christine Blasey Ford during the hearings for soon-to-be Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And in the current efforts to overturn Roe v. Wade, even though there was a little bit of good news today, I'd like to rededicate the poem to every woman who has struggled to take charge of her body and her destiny. Milkweed, Mount Auburn Cemetery. Ripe pods have burst and seeds are rising on silk tides over the weeping pagoda tree. Victorian statuary inscribed his wife. Over the tower dedicated to the founding father. They flit past the graves of suffragists whose voices were mocked in their time. They shimmer, a fitful vision, one day will take root. And my last poem for tonight is called Inside a Thought Bubble. Dreams sometimes come with a free trial of something you thought you wanted. Your fingernails paint themselves red and grow into claws. You shave your head so you can feel closer to the sun. An imagined lover hands you a glimpse. While you sleep, a wig machine weaves regret into silk. A quilter hand stitches a gathered view. The future hides with speckled moths, pineapples, amulets, flamboyant scarves, and fearless swans swimming backwards like dreams. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jennifer. That's wonderful to hear that, because I'm looking forward to having the book. I don't have it yet, but this is a great preview for me. You know, sure. Near the beginning, just a thought, you were talking about the difference or the shades between hope and optimism. And as you were reading, one thing that struck me repeatedly is your focus on the concrete in so many dimensions of the concrete and what that can imply, how you can perceive it. And for me, there's something that helps with both hope and optimism in staying concrete. So I appreciate that very much. So we'll move on to Jan Schreiber. Jan Schreiber is a poet and translator whose work has appeared over several decades in the US, Canada, and the UK. An author of 5 books of poetry and many critical articles, he has taught in the B-O-L-L-I, Bali, I'll pronounce it, or perhaps Bali program at Brandeis since 2012. His critical book, Sparring with the Sun, was published in 2013, followed by Peccadillos, the book of poems, in 2014, and Bay Leaves in 2019. He was Poet Laureate of Brookline from 2015 to 2017. For 10 years, he has run a symposium in Colorado on poetry criticism. His book of translations, The Poems of Paul Valéry, has just been published, and there's a note that his books are all available through Amazon. So please welcome Jan Schreiber.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for putting on such a wonderful program over so many years. And I look forward to hearing more from many of you. I'm going to start off with a poem called Closet Meditation. I'm afraid half my shirts are frayed, yet I can't throw them out. Even the torn one stays. You never know when you might need to do a messy job, unstop a drain or grout the bathroom floor. Other shirts are almost new. They're for the days I'll have to give a lecture or sit for a TV interview. There have been none recently that I recall. Mostly I'm here alone. I write. I wouldn't have to wear a shirt at all. And yet it sets a tone. But what's the tone I want today? I might decide a shirt of bold design wouldn't be bad, so that perhaps if you dropped in, you'd like the plaid and never see the loosening threads, the early signs of imminent decay that would remind you just how surreptitiously all our wraps can fall away. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to read 3 stories, which are a little longer than the average poem. And the first one is a slightly macabre poem that takes place in Venice. It's called Juliana. On Venice's canals, the lapping waves beat lightly the andante of the city, greeting the slow arrival of the dawn. Pietro rose from restless sleep, inhaled fresh bakery smells, recalled Juliana's fury, and felt remorse. She'd screamed that he was wrong to think her treacherous, and fatally wrong to cast their precious years into the waves. She was a woman in whom dark-eyed fury glowered in triumph, facing off her city-bred rigor against the languor she inhaled from boats and breeze. And it began to dawn on him that rage was something she could don like a Venetian mask. So was he wrong to seek her out again when he inhaled hints of her fragrance? Self-doubt came in waves as night embraced the verges of the city. Juliana harbored no self-doubt. Her fury had sharpened to a point, and her porphyry-handled stiletto pierced his neck. By dawn, his blood would course canals through all the city. Unnoticed, drawn by a sense of something wrong, a gondolier saw slipping through the waves his friend's limp torso that had just inhaled its final breath. He took the scene in, held in his mind's eye Juliana's form and fury, observed reflected in the light-struck waves the crimson scarf she wore, and fastened on a project to avenge that mortal wrong, then oared through mazes of duplicity. And in the small hours of the sleeping city, passing beneath a bridge, he sharply inhaled the telltale crimson scarf could not be wrong. He swung an oar with calibrated fury. A woman who would never see the dawn tipped into the unceasing, heedless waves. But even righteous fury can be wrong. She who inhaled the waves was innocent. Juliana fled the city with the dawn. Now for a complete change of pace. I thought how when we try to describe some part of our experience, something that happened to us or something we felt, it's hard to get it right on first try. We often need to make several passes at it. And it occurred to me again as I was raking leaves one day, thinking about the imperfections of a rake. So the result was this poem called The Rake's Progress. Branch, frond, fingers, ribs of fish, but man-made, stronger, regular, its form less lovely, simpler, ready to possess briefly as words everything in its path. Its studied imperfection leaves behind much on the first stroke. Still, it can recoup. It never gathers all it grasps, and yet subtly responsive, its cold claws collect whatever earth puts forth, stuttering over stones, adjusting to contingency, heaping up what once was beautiful, and pass after pass over uneven ground. Here's a little poem called Camera Obscura. Who can retrieve from fallen spray, or guess from altered sand or air, the wave just passed, caught in the eye, vanished, but still unfurling there. And here's another watery poem. This one is called One Crow Sorrow. Yellow chair, foggy air, at the landing, sit and stare. Engines shake, widening wake, regret, explain, excuse, forsake. Gulls squeal low, and the crow. You had your moment, let it go. My wife is a painter, and she makes a sort of covert appearance in a couple of these poems. Here's one of them. It's called Night Piece for Anna, but Anna isn't my wife. Anna is a cat. Still in the waning light, as orange clouds marbleize what was a silver sky, and pines at water's edge darken to silhouette, still are you leaning there to capture with your brush the nuances of glowing, alive yet to your eye. Below you, on the ledge, warmth fading from the air, the old cat stares at dusk, watching the dark shapes massing. What spirit aids the unknowing witnesses of the storm, helpless against all harm, whose alert eyes still trap the fading light and keep watch and do not weep their short days passing? Most of you know Zeno and his paradoxes from ancient Greece. This one goes, Zeno, I pray your arrow finds its mark someday, but not while I've come just halfway. Okay, here's another appearance of the painter in a poem called The Portrait. I watch her measuring me, her glance fleeing to her palette once, then back, dissatisfied. Look left, don't turn your head, just eyes. She sees me frown and likes it. Hold that. As she is reassessing me, I build her look by look. Her indecision is in fact a rapid weighing made elusive by the narrowed eye. In line and shape, she captures me, looking across the water into a time that only I, uncertain where time went, remember or invent. And she, I hold her in a nest of shadows, wrap her in a web of words. But do I have her so? How would I know? Each of us grasps a semblance sealed in flesh, while something else yet undefined tugs at the mind. How can we hold on? Beyond us, the mirrored lake, untroubled by the breeze, mists while we're unaware into dissolving air. Now this is about someone else's wife. It's called The Politician's Wife. What rocky times she's seen him through. Public humiliation, jeers from those who wondered if she knew. She knew. She's seen through him for years. Okay, now here is another story. This one is a kind of ballad, I think you'd say, but it's not in a ballad stanza. It's a different sort of unusual stanza for a ballad, but it's a story like a ballad anyway. Maggie and Faith, single and middle-aged, were best of friends. Each summer, without fail, they headed north to rooms they had engaged in a large private home. Though truth to tell, one room, since cash was scarce, but with twin beds. Such lovely maiden ladies, people said. It was grandmother's house they hosteled in. She rented rooms and had some time to spare to wash the sheets and towels, dust and clean. She charged them, but the price was more than fair. Unlike the other guests blown by the winds, she thought of Faith and Maggie as old friends. Maggie was large and jolly, plump and round, with stories and a cheerful sort of wit. Faith was reserved and prim, and when she found a chair outside the bustle, she would knit and watch the fun and smile a thin-lipped smile as Maggie kept us chuckling all the while. And they adopted all our family as if they had no people of their own. Aunt Maggie and Aunt Faith they were to me. We hardly ever saw the two alone. They came to family picnics in the park and brought hot dogs and talked long after dark. They played canasta and they watched the soaps. They walked along the harbor where the yachts bobbed in the breezes, straining at the ropes. They went to plays and criticized the plots, and if they ever longed for life to bloom, they kept that longing in their single room. One summer, maybe it was late July, we went to watch the sunset on the bay, and Faith had something odd about her eye that puzzled me, though why I couldn't say. When Maggie made a joke, I saw her lift an eyebrow, but I didn't catch the drift. Next winter came a letter and a shock. "I'm getting married," Maggie wrote. The man, whose name was Jimmy, made his wealth in stock and would be good to her. It was their plan to visit at the usual time, she said, if they could get a room with double bed. Come summer, heartening as sunny days, Maggie was there with Jimmy by her side to join the family outings and to raise a glass to toast the sweetness of the bride. But Faith was ill that year and never came, and after that, nothing was quite the same. We heard she moved down south and tended gardens and was content from all that we could learn. Some people say a heart wound dries and hardens, yet years went by and Faith did not return. Perhaps she thought that none of us would care, but something faded when she was not there. She was the dimmer light. We looked her way only when nothing bolder caught the eye. But still she had a minor part to play until the headlong action passed her by. She'd known a world in which she might discover a vision of herself. Now that was over. This is a kind of memorial poem for my brother-in-law, Sam Fox, who died a year and a half ago. It's called All the Bright Illusions. In a charmed summer garden among the fruit trees, where we walked along the wall, we barely noticed it. At one point, when you leaned against it, it gave way. There was a sudden breeze. You were no longer there. Bird cries did not abate, and the stream went on flowing. Small creatures scurried. How can a man evaporate? Time turns a corner, and the world is as it was yesterday afternoon, but for that sleight of hand. I'm wise and damaged now. Give me some time to rest. All the bright illusions I loved are giving way. And finally, the last story, on a lighter note, is called On Letitia's Toes. Wherever my Letitia goes, she is preceded by her toes. And as the wise observer knows, on every toe, a toenail grows. It grows without impedance till it overfills the shoe and still torments her like a hedgehog's quill. Then will she have it trimmed? She will. And so Letitia, lover, friend, finding it difficult to bend, requests I intervene to end a soreness that a blade can mend. With fetching faith does she surrender toes exquisite, soft and tender, to offices she prays I'll render, although she knows my skills are slender. Then I, with eyes precise and keen, address the toe with my machine, intending to produce a clean division at the golden mean. Oh, brave campaigns that go awry. Oh, roads too often traveled by. Oh, blades that close when flesh is nigh. Letitia shrieks a crystal cry. Now gentler than a poppy's dust and softer than a zephyr's gust, yet urgent as a satyr's lust, I pant to save her fainting trust. With mien morose and melancholic and stratagems near diabolic, I ward off curses vitriolic while feigning virtues apostolic. Again, I face the trembling digit and force my fingers not to fidget, maneuvering all the while the widget to make that giant nail a midget. While she endeavors not to flinch, I promise her it will not pinch, and with a superhuman clinch, curtail the nail by half an inch. One down, now only 9 toes left to be of excess claws bereft. By moves so intricate and deft, her feet will celebrate the theft. Ascending the chromatic scale, I conquer each successive nail. Resistance is of no avail. At last, Letitia can exhale. So, lovers, let us celebrate collusion to abbreviate mad outgrowths and our not too late avoidance of a tragic fate. Set free at last, Letitia springs through woods, past streams and fairy rings, and overleaps all earthly things as if her toes had sprouted wings. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Jen. That was a positively hilarious conclusion. I really appreciated that. And I have to say, I never really thought about the possibility of something like a garden rake as being able to serve as a basis for a complex allegory. So thank you for that as well. Our third reader, Danielle Legros George, is a writer, academic, and author of several books of poetry, including The Dear Remote Nearness of You, winner of the New England Poetry Club's Sheila Margaret Moughton Book Prize. Her awards include fellowships from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, MacDowell, the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, and the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art, MassMoCA. She is the former Poet Laureate of the City of Boston, serving in the role from 2015 to 2019. She directs the Leslie MFA program in creative writing. Her most recent work is a book of translations, Island Heart, the poems of Ida Faubert, published in 2021 by Subpress Collective. And she has provided 2 different links, her own website and the publisher's site for that book. So please welcome Danielle.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. It's so nice to share space with and this screen with Jennifer and Jan, and to hear your great poems. Thank you, Sandy, and the Jamaica Plain Poets for creating chapter and verse. It's a cold winter night here in New England, or at least here in Boston. And I want us to consider making it less so. So I'd like to transport us back through 2 seasons, back through fall to the summer, and also back almost a century to the 1930s and take us to Paris, where there is a woman named Ida Faubert, writing wonderful rhymed verse, many love poems, some of which I have translated and appear in the recent book, Island Heart. The poem I will open with is entitled Soir Tropical, or Tropical Night. And I will read the French original so that you can hear her wonderful rhyme scheme and meter, followed by my English translation. And I have not translated the rhymed poems into rhymed English. Soir tropical. Le soir est lumineux, le soir est tendre et beau. Le soleil s'est éteinte, la lune est sur les roses. Une longueur pénètre au cœur même des choses. Les grands palmiers noirs rêvent au bord de l'eau. Les jasmins ont mêlé leurs branches étoilées aux lianes en fleurs. La laine de l'été caresse les fruits lourds. La grave volupté laisse traîner son voile au détour des allées. Là-bas, sur le chemin, pas un chant, pas un bruit. Rien ne trouble la paix d'un bonheur qu'on écoute. Viens sentir les parfums sur le bord de la route et respirer mon âme éparse dans la nuit. Tropical night. The night is luminous. The night is tender and beautiful. The sun has obscured itself. The moon rests on the roses. A languor enters the very heart of things, and the tall black palms dream at the water's edge. The jasmine have mixed their star-studded branches with lianas in bloom. Summer's breath caresses the heavy fruit. The dense sensuality lets its long veil linger along the sinuous paths. Over there, on the way, not a song, not a sound. Nothing disturbs the peace of a joy we listen to. Come, take in the fragrances at the road's edge and breathe in my soul spread across the night. Ida Faubert. I was really captivated by Faubert, in part because she's a Haitian literary foremother. I'm Haitian. And she was one of the first Haitian women to publish under her own name at the beginning of the 20th century in Port-au-Prince. She also is a poet of formal precision. So she's got a mastery of fixed form, and her skill as a word slinger is just formidable, in my opinion. And she also has this very interesting biography. She's the daughter of a Haitian president and a French woman. The president was given a coup d'etat. She was raised in France in Belle Époque, or the Roaring 20s, in Paris, and then she returned to Haiti to scandalize Haitian elite polite society. And that she would go back and forth. So she was part of a literary scene both in Paris and in Port-au-Prince. So I think that makes her biography and her work remarkable. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to translate her. And finally, she really, in my opinion, sort of pushed against the tropes or the stereotypes assigned to women of color in the European imagination through her poetry. So as I mentioned, she writes a lot of love poems, and love invariably goes wrong. So I will read to you a poem of love gone wrong, entitled Mon amour, attendez, wait, my love, by Faubert. When you forget that you held me captive in your arms like a thing that was yours. When you grow tired of my sweet love, wait until night falls to tell me. Then you won't see my undone face, my sorry eyes, my trembling mouth. The dark will veil my crushing sorrow. Wait until night falls completely. Wait until the wind makes the trees wail and the birds of the woods cry in their nests. Then you won't hear my sobs or the cry of my heart, colder than marble. Wait until thunder darkens the skies and it pours nearby on the road. In the sad night, you'll mistake, no doubt, the tears in my eyes with the tears of the sky. One day you'll forget that you held me captive in your arms like a thing that was yours. So to tell me this, have the sweetest words. Wait, my love, until night falls. I find this poem terribly melodramatic, and I love it for that reason. Ida Faubert. And then a final Faubert poem written to a certain Madame R.G. Faubert was said to have loved both women and men, but apparently not this one. Rondel to Madame R.G. R.G. With your bewitching eyes, whose dark beauty haunts us, with the seductive grace of the most charming fowler, you're like the lovely buds of the enchanting blue countries with your bewitching eyes, whose dark beauty haunts us. To ease all pains, your voice is lulling, and one thinks you care, but you cause such grief with your bewitching eyes. Ida Faubert. I'll read a couple of poems from The Dear Remote Nearness of You. Still life with orbs. Between the thing and the name of it is a world, and a world behind this world. There is my mask placed on the table. There is the wooden table and the space beneath it. There is an orange on the floor when it should be on the table in the yellow basket meant for oranges, but which contains a cat licking one paw. What do cats know of oranges? What do birds know of water, unless they plunge their beaks into it, breaking some poor fish's sleep? What do fish know of birds, except the slash of bill, the sudden flash, the stop? A stateless poem. If you are born and you are stateless, if you are born and you are homeless, if your state and your home are not yours, yet everything you know, what are you? Who are you? And who am I without the dark fields I walk upon, the streets I know, the blue corners I call mine, the ones you call yours? Who am I to call myself citizen and human and free? And who are you to call yourself landed and grounded and free? And who is judge enough? Who native? Who other? And who are we who move so freely without accents of identification, without skin of identification, with all manner of identification, with gold seals of approval, with stamps of good fortune, with the accident of blameless birth? Who are we to be so lucky? I'm just really pleased that this poem was included in a book called Statelessness, Governance, and the Problem of Citizenship. It's an amazing collection of essays whose editors make clear that the underlying problem of statelessness is not statelessness, but rather citizenship, including the ways in which citizenship is governed and how it's used as a governance tool. So if you're interested in these issues, I encourage you to pick up a copy of this book. And I'm also thinking about the recent Haitian migrants and asylum seekers at the southern border, and some of whom who were repatriated to Haiti, some of whom have entered the States. Some new poems. Diaspora is a word. Diaspora is a word. Diaspora is a non-wish, a heavy drum, is a wandering in the utter until something opens up, seas, desert, is the dune that shifts a place in the caravan over which the moon appears, a knife of narrow light. In this poem, do not use the word revolution. Use instead a slow swelling of light that begins at a beginning when the scar giver forges the scar and forgets, and the bearer remembers indelibly the mark on the body, recalls how a mark can be made on a body. In the ear, a clear consciousness whispered. Use reply, because peace is a place free of trouble, a blue firmament, a gold sun that reaches the skin. Use instead the equalization of all suns, the standing next to, the standing for, rotation and the equilibrium of stars, objects held together by their own gravity. Grave is the flame of dissonance, is the mind honed with the vision of its unity. Grave is the fist raised of the body. And this is my last poem. It's entitled The Afternoon, after a poem by Mahmoud Darwish, which begins with these 3 lines. If I were told by evening, you will die, so what will you do until then? These are the Darwish lines, which are also the first 3 lines of my poem. If I were told by evening you will die, so what will you do then, until then? Of course, there would be a flurry of emails. Or perhaps one email sent to all. No, that would not do. The flurry then, of where to find the keys, the passwords, codes, the papers that sort a life, meaning. I would want to see the round faces of the soon-to-be mourners of my love, family, shining moons against a dark backdrop. Friends. I would wish to view the sky in whatever mood it's taken, bright like this morning's or thunderous. Something's happening. Why not bolt of light thrown by some god? I would call my great love of youth, when pain and beauty were one thing, who is married to someone else, whose number I do not have, but would try for a half hour to find before forsaking the task to futility. Flowers would be necessary. White tulips, white roses, the afros of hydrangea, in vases set throughout the apartment. The time would pass too quickly with this work. I would walk down the stairs to bid adieu to my neighbors. Goodbye, I would say to them all. Back up, I would regard my dead relatives in photos to let them know I was on my way. I would bathe, brush my hair into a bun, paint my nails indigo. Frankincense would burn, drift up in plumes. I would lie on the couch with the music of drums, Yavalu, and call out to them, I am ready. Thank you.
Danielle, thank you so much for some of your new work, which is wonderful to hear, and also for bringing Ida Faubert back to us, at least a little bit, all of these worlds simultaneously. That